Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Brothers on the Board, the podcast where we help teachers find peace and fulfillment in their careers. It's Tuesday. Well, it's going to be released on Tuesday. We're excited. I'm sure that many of you are on your way to work or on your way home, doing the dishes, doing all those other fun podcast listening activities. So I hope you make it through those things okay. Today's episode, we are talking about something that I think all teachers can benefit from, and that is accepting feedback. So, as always, my name's Jon, and I'm joined here by my brother Wes. We're both seventh grade teachers, and we just enjoy helping other people and having these conversations. This is fun for us. So, Wes, how's it going, man?
It's going good, going real good. Right now, currently the weekend, so I'm relaxing and enjoying myself. When it drops on Tuesday, obviously, I will be in class, hopefully having a wonderful time. So
Yeah, there you go. That's the spirit. Hopefully having a wonderful time. It's
hopefully.
like no chaos or anything. I mean, to be honest, like part of the reason that we release this on Tuesdays is because Tuesdays just kind of suck. It's just a really bad day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've been telling people that for years. Like everyone always says that like Monday is the worst day of the
Oh, no, no,
school
no.
week, and I'm like, no. I'm still fresh on Monday. It's still good. Tuesday, you still got the rest of the week to go. You know, you don't have a whole lot to look
Yeah.
forward to on that Tuesday. So this is a great opportunity to, at least have something to look forward to and something to enjoy. So
Yeah, I mean, Wednesday's hump day, Thursday's pre-Friday. And pre-Friday, Friday Eve, the day before the weekend. You know, you keep going. It's all good things. And then you have Friday, which is obviously epic. So, today, we're talking about accepting feedback as teachers, which is something that I think not only new teachers need to be aware of, but something that I think veteran teachers also have to consider as the educational landscape continues to change and kind of move out from under our feet sometimes. So, today, before we get started, I do want to say this. Thank you to everyone who filled out our little survey on Facebook. If you have not filled that out and you have followed us on Facebook, please consider going and doing that. If you're a parent, it's basically looking at how parents and teachers interact with one another. And it makes a big difference in terms of guiding our discussion for episode 8, which is going to be talking about teacher-parent interactions. So we would appreciate that. And again, thank you to everyone who has filled that out. So, to get us started for today, Wes, what is the purpose of feedback? As a teacher who has, I'm sure, had your share of feedback given to you by other teachers, administrators, sometimes students, what is the purpose of it? And what's the purpose of it? So, what do you think?
So I believe that, as teachers, we are first of all giving feedback all the time and
Yeah.
to our students. And I think that sometimes we get lost in the criticisms of the feedback when we receive it from administrators or other teachers or other adults. And we don't think of it as like constructive, right? And I think a big part of feedback coming from administrators and stuff, obviously, is how, first of all, the person is communicating it to you, but also it's your own personal mental way of thinking about it, right? Your own
Yeah.
positive spin. It needs to be constructive. And I think sometimes we just get lost in those negative criticizing, although looking at this and they're thinking it's bad, rather than they just want to help me improve. Right.
Yeah. Teachers are prideful. I think teachers are some of the most prideful creatures to walk on the earth. We there's just so many ways of doing it, right? There's just so many different factors and things for us to consider that it doesn't always, there's no one size fits all way of doing it. So we're always questioning whether or not what we're doing is right. And when people give you, feedback, whether it's constructive or not, some teachers look at that and say, well, I've been doing this for the last 2 years. Like, are you telling me like it was a waste of time? Are you telling me that like I haven't been doing what I should be doing? And in some cases they get defensive, right? They get upset or annoyed or whatever it is. And I think that can be harmful in some cases, not only to teacher administrator teacher relationships or whatever, but also to just being better at what you do, right? I mean, because that's ultimately the goal, right? I mean, the goal of feedback is to be constructive and to help people uh, continue to improve or to adapt in some cases. It's not to say that you've always been bad. It's just that education is always changing. It just is. It's just the landscape that we've been given. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that the purpose of feedback ultimately is to be constructive, be helpful, and try to move people along.
And
So,
just to add to that real quick before we move on, 9 times out of 10 in education, it's a very solo job, very individualized, and like you are on your little island, you are in your classroom, and it's like going the way you
uh-huh.
want it to go. And have someone step in and tell you that you're doing something incorrectly can be very, very difficult, right? Like you said, because you've been doing it the same way, and you feel like it's the correct way to do it, and so um, I think with the constructive feedback also needs to be some pushback. That's why after a observation, we have a post observation meeting and talk about it and
Mhm.
debate it,
Yeah.
because there's not one size fits all in education like we want to believe. So I think as important to feedback is receiving the feedback and communicating with each other. So
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, I think that, I've been really lucky over the years with administrators that will have that conversation in like post feedbacks where like it's difficult to walk into a room for 30 minutes and really get an idea of how this thing is going entirely, if that makes sense. Like, why you're doing the things that you're doing. I mean, I know you have like a pre-observation thing or whatever, um, but it's hard to walk in for 30 minutes, 40 minutes or whatever it is, and then see the entire picture. So then you get in those post meetings and you say, well, here's, the reason that I was doing these things. And in many cases, those things, they just kind of clear up and it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Right. So I've been really blessed with those kinds of discussions. And I'm sure that most people can agree with that, but I think that's important. Um, so over the course of your career, and this is another thing that I'm curious about. How have you personally as a teacher been, and I'll share mine as well. How have you been at accepting feedback from others? Is this something that you roll with? You say, okay, yeah, you're right. Or you consider it. I need to grow, or do you get sort of defensive? Like, where are you at with it?
So as far as me personally, I feel like as a person, I've always been good at accepting feedback and criticisms and taking them, again, not personally and not critically, but rather as a way to improve, and looking at it from that lens of we're all here trying to help each other improve our practice. So
Hmm.
I take a lot of the criticisms I've been given over the years. And again, like you said before, like I have been blessed with some administrators that are very, very thoughtful in their feedback and very intentional. And so I haven't had a lot of experiences with like super like nitpicky comments and things. So
Hmm.
I think I handle it real well. I mean, even for like not just in education, like this podcast, like we're getting feedback from viewers, and by all means, if anyone's out there listening and they have tips or tricks or any kind of comment that would help us improve the podcast, by all means, let us know. And I just always want to improve. So I think that
Yeah,
I've done well with it. What about you?
I agree. I think I've been fantastic at taking feedback over the years. I am one of the best at constructive criticism. I see you shaking your head here. You're like, no, you're not. No, no. I'll be honest. It is a serious character flaw of mine, and it has been for basically my entire life with everything that I've ever done. I have never been good at taking feedback. I will admit that I am a sensitive little dude when it comes to taking feedback. I hear things and I'm like, people will tell me things and they'll be like, you need to do this or whatever. Especially, I will say this over the last 5, 6 years, I've got much, much better. Um, and especially from I've gained relationships with people that I really respect, and like I've got much better at it. But dude, early in my teaching career, you would tell me things. You'd be like, "Hey, you need to do this, or you need to consider this, or whatever." And I'd be like, "Okay, yeah, you're right." And then I'd go back to my room, or consider that. Just say I'm doing something wrong. You know what I mean? Like I would take it very personally, and I would be like cold shoulder for like the next like week, like, but I've got much better at it. It is a character flaw. It is something that I'm always trying to get better at. But yeah, and that's kind of the purpose of this is coming from someone who doesn't do well with that. What are some things that we can do to improve or to consider? And ultimately, that's part of the goal of this podcast is we want to take things away from it back to our own classroom. So this is kind of a self-reflection a little bit into into these practices. But yeah, no, I've not been good at it at all. But so I'm glad that you're better at it than I am. So, and that kind of leads us into this next idea of, do you think that veteran teachers are worse at taking feedback than new teachers, or is it just kind of a toss up? Is it just based on the individual? I have my thoughts. What do you think?
So I'm gonna be
all of the veteran teachers are out there listening right now. They're just like,
all of the veteran teachers out there that are listening. This is gonna be a difficult one. You may want to earmuff this portion.
Choose your words carefully, Leonidas. They may be your last.
I think veteran teachers, I don't know if they, I'm just going to go out and say it. Yeah, they do not take criticism well. I think a lot of new teachers are in that mode of, well, you have some new teachers that come in and they think like they know everything, right?
Yes.
Obviously. I mean, there's people out there that think they know everything. I'm not one of those people.
It was me. I look back at my first year and dude, like I cringe thinking about some of the things that I would say in like PD and stuff, like because I know there was a lot. I can hear the eyes rolling in my head right now at people in the room when I think back to some of the things that I said in these meetings.
So there's definitely, there's definitely a character trait of some people, right? Some people just do not handle that well, and they think that they think they know a lot and they're confident, and in their ability, and they don't want to hear that negative comment or that comment that like, and I think some people it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy where they have these like negative thoughts about themselves, like, oh, I feel weak in this area, and then someone like says it, and then you're
it just confirms it.
Just confirms what you've been thinking already, and then you get really defensive about it, right? Which is more me, right? Because the confidence piece, we don't have to worry about that one. But veteran teachers, I think, for the most part, are very complacent. They have seen education. Being in it in 6 years, I haven't been in it very long, but even in 6 years, I have seen so many changes and the flow of education going back and forth. And so you leave a lot of meetings with those veteran teachers being like, we did this 10 years ago and here it is again,
And it does. It runs in cycles. You hear teachers say that all the time.
Absolutely. I mean, history in general, as also a social studies teacher, history in general repeats itself. So, same thing goes for education. So, and I think that they get complacent in that, and they see that, and they know that, like,
it's going to change again in another 2 years.
It's going to change, I'm just getting, and
I've heard, not wrong.
And I've heard this from people. I've been guilty of it before of saying that, like, it's going to change again. I'm just going to do what I'm doing. Like I've been doing it. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because it does get exhausting and overwhelming to have all of those changes over and over and over again, like.
Yes, absolutely. And
bell ringers, man, bell ringers.
I feel like bell ringers to a degree has been like a staple though. Like they've been around and they kind of just keep sticking around. I feel like
really
for the most part.
You've seen that?
I mean, I feel like it. I feel like, for at least at my school, bell ringers, some kind of warm up exercise, digital notebook, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I feel like that has been a thing that just is always there.
Interesting. See, like we had a big push for like a bell ringer, bell ringer, bell ringer. Have to have something when the kids come in. Have to have something when the kids come in. And then we kind of went away from that a little bit. Like no one was talking about it. And then all of a sudden it was back for a while and like a big focus, big focus, big focus. I don't think it ever went
Okay,
away, but like the focus shifted, right? And
now
you got a billion things going on. You have to focus on one thing at a time. But
I think though, like now, when I say that bell ringers have always been a thing, I don't mean within the context of the school, like pushing a focus on it. What I mean is like, from a teaching standpoint, it's just they're so good at letting you get the lesson started that pretty much everyone does them always. It's just it sets up your room for success. Like it lets you see so many things, and we're completely getting off topic right now, but it lets you see which kids are here to learn today, which ones are here to play today, right? It lets you take attendance reasonably without having to worry so much because they have something to do. It gets them thinking or discussing on the topic. There's just so many things that
it
there's so many benefits.
formatively assesses the day before, right? That's a big
Yeah.
one. Like it
Previews the lesson coming,
Yep.
right? There's so many things that it does well.
Yeah.
That I think it's just something that just kind of sticks around. Now, I will say this with the veteran new teacher thing. New teachers, while veterans, I think in some cases, not always. Now, I will have, I've had teachers that I know personally who have been there for a long, long time, longer than me. And they will say, I enjoy having student teachers because they're fresh out of college and they bring me new ideas. Shout out, Mr. Todd. So like he'll say that he enjoys seeing what some of these students bring to the table. Like you're bringing me something cool, something new that I don't know about, whether it's technology or a new strategy. He enjoys seeing that. So this is not a blanket statement, for all veteran teachers, obviously. Like some are better than others. Now, with that being said, new teachers. I mentioned a minute ago that, I cringe when I think back to my first year because that was me. Like I was that guy who, they ask a question. I'm like, I know this answer. I'm raising my hand and I'm going to elaborate on this. I'm going to talk for like 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes on this topic. And I know people in there are just like, oh my God, dude, you poor man. You don't know what's coming, right? And it gets on people's nerves. It just does. I know plenty of teachers who get really annoyed when you have like people come in and it's just like you need to realize that you are kind of a blank slate because things aren't going to go as planned and then you're going to get really frustrated. Like you have to realize that you're here to grow because that first year is like you have to kind of be okay with failing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be okay. This is horrible. And this is not all. There's exclusions. There's some people that just jump right out of the gate and they're awesome, but you have to be okay with being bad. I mean, that's just the truth, right? You have to be okay with things not being perfect and saying, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do this better, right? And taking that feedback from people and making it your own, trying to learn from it. So yeah, 100%. So before we move on, we have a few more things to discuss. I do want to shout out our Facebook page and also our Twitter account. I would really appreciate it if you are a listener, if you would subscribe, not necessarily subscribe, but follow our social media accounts, whether it's Facebook or Twitter. We are having those discussions or plan on having those discussions on those platforms, and we would love for you to be a part of it. It helps guide our discussions. It helps us grow as teachers. It helps us help each other. So we would really appreciate it if you would take the time to do that. Okay, so our next kind of topic here, subtopic, whatever you want to call it. What kind of feedback gets under your skin in terms of the way it's worded? So like when you receive feedback, how should it be worded? And you know what? I'm going to start with this one. I'm going to start this idea. One of the things that irritates me or has irritated me in the past, and I don't know of any, like I can't think of any specific examples necessarily from administrators or stuff, but like speaking in absolutes. So if you're someone who gives feedback, That's something that probably needs to be avoided. And I think everyone gets annoyed with this, not just in teaching, but across the board, saying things like, your students are always off task, right? That is not a good way to phrase that. Maybe I noticed that your students were off task during this part, right? And most of the time, people saying those things, they don't mean it like constantly. They don't mean it forever, right? They're trying to be helpful. They're saying, hey, your kids are off task. You might want to consider doing this. You always forget to take attendance, which is partially true with me, to be honest. I am the world's worst. I'm convinced that the reason I have first bell plan is because they are just like, you know what, we're going to give all of ELA first bell plan because Mr. Howard will not take daily attendance. I'm so bad at it.
That is something we have in common. My attendance clerk has to hate me. She calls me almost every day.
Dude, there was an administrator years ago. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but they eventually just came to me and like, hey, the secretary is like ready to like kill me. Like, dude, you've got to start taking your attendance. I'm getting notes in my mailbox, and every day I'm seeing it. I'm like, oh my God, I got to remember this, man. I just have so many things in my mind where I'm so excited about what I'm doing that day that I just jump right into it and I just forget. But yeah, it's something that we got, we both got to do better at. But yeah, speaking in absolutes, definitely something that I think should be avoided. Non-constructive criticism. You know the kind I'm talking about? Just saying your kids are always off task, or hey, I noticed your kids are off task during this part. That's not particularly helpful, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, you got to give me some things, some ideas to improve it, some examples maybe.
Yeah, right? You got to give some strategies, right? You have to give something. You have to give some helpful advice to those, especially those new teachers, right? When you're giving feedback, you got to give some helpful advice. What do you do in your bag of tricks that could help in that situation?
Absolutely. And it's funny because the next one I'm going to talk about is something that I know some of the teachers that I work with will probably, a couple of them will remember this story. But the other one is being compared to other teachers. Being compared to other teachers, I think that one really gives people the ick. You know what I mean?
I have never in my teaching career had this happen. So how does that even happen? How do they address that?
So this isn't necessarily a bad, it wasn't on purpose. And it wasn't something that, so, all right. The person that I wasn't necessarily being compared to. It's just something that they had done. I know she's listening to this right now because I know she listens to the podcast, so she's going to hear this. So years ago, we had to make chant boards. Now, my room is not now because I have a co-teacher that she's much, much better at this stuff than I do, and she basically decorates the whole room. But when I was by myself, I would have people legitimately ask me if I was moving. Like, are you leaving? Like, did you get fired? Because my room is it's like a desolate wasteland of just black and white. It's just awful.
It is decorated as if it was a prison cell. That's mine.
It's not good, dude. I had like the bulletin board in the back had nothing on it for like 3/4 of the year. And I would keep saying like, I'm going to do this bulletin board. Nope. Just never. I think I did it in like March or something. But anyways, we had to create chant boards. And for those of you who don't know what champs is, it's like conversation level, help. How do you get help? It's to tell students expectations. And my chant board was not good. It was not good. And they came in the room and they took a picture of it and stuff like that during the observation. And they sent me a picture. Now, this person I'm talking about, they were like my counterpart. They were the English teacher on the other team. So if you're going to be compared to someone like that, that's who it is, right? And I'll be. She's fantastic. She's phenomenal. She does a great job. And So like we're really at the time, especially, it really wasn't a comparison. But they send me a picture of her chant board, and they're like, "Hey, like they didn't say her name." And the funny part is they didn't say her name in the email, but they're like, "Hey, you might want to consider doing a chant board like this. Like this is an example of a really good chant board." And I'm like, that this is my TBT, right? Like I'm in this room with this person like every day. Like at some point, I've seen this board before. I know who it is. So I just thought that was a funny one to share. But I think that's something though that really gets on teachers' nerves is if you're comparing them to other teachers. And I think there's a fine line, right, between comparing them to someone and saying, "Hey, you know, do observations. We're going to pick a few teachers for you to do observations." If you're a new teacher especially, like I think that there is benefit in doing that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like having you go in and like watch other teachers, I think there's benefit to that.
I just went Monday and observed another school district, so I know exactly what that is.
Because you don't have to be like, "Hey, you're really bad and they're really good, so go watch their class." Like I think this should be something that everyone does, right? I think that going into other rooms is really beneficial because it helps give you new ideas, helps you see how other people manage their classrooms, those kinds of things. But I do remember one year I was asked to do an observation of another teacher, and dude, it made me so mad while I'm in the observation because there were some kids in this room that were absolute terrors in my class. Like almost impossible to teach. That big part of it was my fault. I did not get off on the right foot that year, but I go into this other guy's room and I'm sitting there, and these kids are like angels in there. They're just taking notes. They're raising their hand. "Excuse me." I'm sitting in the back of the room like, "What is this?" Like
just
that's
seething.
Just so mad. But then it makes you realize, oh, it's me. I'm Taylor Swift. I'm the problem. It's me. Like I think that's why it made me so mad.
You think we could hashtag Taylor Swift on this one? Just
yeah, there we go. We're going to hashtag Taylor Swift. Shout out Taylor Swift. But yeah, no, I think comparing teachers to other teachers really is not a good thing to do. But to have teachers observe in areas and be careful with your wording, I think this is useful.
Well, now that you've mentioned that, and I said at the beginning of this that like I'd never experienced that, I have experienced that. It's just that my administration did it in a very tactful way because they asked me to observe places whenever I first started, and that's probably why.
Yeah. So, I mean, the observations are, that's one thing. I think that's completely reasonable. I think that's good. That's a good thing. Like I said. Anyways, moving on to our next thing here is, and I think this is a touchy one, and I think everyone kind of probably handles this a little different. How do you handle feedback from students on your teaching? I haven't always been, I'm not good in general, but I'm not great. I think I'm even worse taking it from students. Like there was a point in my career where I was like, you know what? I'm going to put up a suggestion box. I think I reconsidered that before I did it. I'm like, maybe not. Am I prepared for this really? What's your thoughts on that?
So this is probably something you actually don't know. I do quarterly surveys with my students.
I do know that. You have mentioned that. So how has that went?
I think it goes very well. I'm like one of my biggest things in education is empowering the students and giving them the opportunity to express themselves. And I mean, it's their education, so I think they deserve to have a bit of a say in it. Obviously, they don't know everything, but they have had some very, very helpful comments. Now, are there some that's like, "You're too loud"? Yeah, I'm very loud. Like
I can't help that. That's just my voice.
This is what it is, right? So obviously there's criticisms from students. Again, going back to our last episode, our previous episode, students will hurt your feelings if you do it. It's gonna happen. You gotta have that thick skin when you read those comments.
Yes, it's scary.
But There are some that will surprise you. Like I don't like how we take notes. It's not a very helpful way of getting my attention or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, that's something I can think about. Um, so I think criticism from students. Now, something that did happen recently that I'm trying to figure out what to do about is in my first class of the day, I was going around and we were doing a class discussion, and I asked some of those very thought provoking questions, and some students answered, and I just said, interesting. Because like you're not supposed to tell them the answer. I just said, interesting. And my kids were
Mhm.
like, you always say interesting. Like you say that literally all the time. And one of them was like, yeah, he says it when someone's wrong.
Oh.
And I was like, I
Mm.
have a tail. And so
Yeah.
now I'm like in my head, like, am I repeating the same thing over and over again?
Yeah, I won't have to come up with something else to say.
So for that whole day,
Um,
I just Googled synonyms for interesting, and I was just throwing out like other ways of saying it.
I mean, the thing is, I think we all do that to some degree. When you have a kid raise their hand and say an answer, like you said, you don't want to take away from other answers, right? So it's not necessarily that they're wrong. It's just that you don't want to take away from what the next kid is going to say when they raise their hand. You don't want to give away answers. Um, Now, I will try to elaborate. Is usually what I do. I will try to find ways to tie it to the answer, even if it's a little off.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be like, okay, well, I see where you're doing this, right? Okay, fair enough. Now, I'll be honest, and if some of my students find this, they're gonna catch me on this probably. One of the things that I have done in the past is if I say, "Oh, okay, I can see that," and then I move on, I'll admit, like, sometimes it's because I can't hear you. My hearing kinda sucks, and, like, if you're I have a big room, especially this year. If you're across the room and you're, like a little mousy girl and you don't have a very loud voice, I can even if it's dead quiet in there, all I hear is I hear nothing useful, so I'll be like, "Okay," but sometimes I'll try to walk over and lean down to listen to them because my hearing is just not good. And so I will do that sometimes, but, I do usually try to make sure that I listen and then elaborate on what they say.
Oh, so I have a story about that real quick. This is actually not my story. It is one of my coworkers' stories, but it is hilarious. So we had a student several years ago. It's been a minute, but this student was like straight A, honors roll, great student, but she was very quiet. So
Yeah,
we were doing an activity outside like beginning of the school year. It was like, I mean, it was probably a month in, 2 months in, right? And the student raised their hand and shared something with the group. Our whole team was out there. Well, sh- the student shares. The teacher is like, yeah, oh, thank you for sharing, and moved on, right? And went to the next person.
oh, no.
End of the year rolls around, and my coworker's like, this student like doesn't talk to me, like. But we're talking about how like the student shares with us and stuff, and he overhears her one day be like, "Yeah, I can't stand him." And he was
Oh,
like,
no.
"Why?" And he like pulls her up at the end of the year, and she's like, "You cut me off at the beginning of the year." And she had not finished her
Okay,
sentence, but he couldn't hear her because she was so
okay.
quiet. And like that completely ruined that relationship over something that was like not even a big deal. But he was like, I just didn't hear her.
Dude, I've done that before. Now, they've usually been like, "Oh, I wasn't done." I'm like, "Oh, okay," and then I'll try to get closer to make sure I'm hearing what they're saying. Like, sometimes it's just like because of time and everything else, or like the logistics of the room, it's difficult for me to hear what you're saying. Um, but when you talk about relationships with students, I had a girl one time that despised me, like intentionally tried to get kicked out of my class. Like she would try to get sent to the office, she would do anything she could, and I had no clue why. I tried everything I could think of. Like I had conferences with her. I tried being as positive as I could. Like for those of you out there, like new teachers who have been told about proximity, right? You get close to them whenever they're talking or whatever. So she would just be sitting there just chatting up a storm on her phone, whatever, while I'm talking, and I would just walk over next to her, right? Because that's typically something you do. You get close to them, and they go, "Oh, I'm being a little too loud," and they stop. This girl, she looks at me while I'm talking, kind of gives me this like stink face, and then she grabs her desk and goes, and just moves it like 4 feet away. And I'm like, well, so much for proximity. But I called her mom though, and I'm like, I don't understand. Like, has she said anything to you? Like, why did I do something to this child that I don't know about? Why does this girl hate me? And her mom was very much like, oh, she's just moody. There's probably no reason. And I never did figure it out. It was like all year. I have no clue. And so you get that. Occasionally you get that. And it is what it is. You just have to do the absolute best you can to figure it out and repair the relationship or just roll with it. It is what it is.
I had a student like that would put like you can change on our we use an online program called Canvas for all of our like classes, like a digital classroom, kind of like Google Classroom, whatever. And so she would put like you could change the name of the class, and so it would be like Howard Science, and then next to it she would put either a sad face or a smiley face.
based on what, like how the day went or something.
I guess, and like one day I was up there working with her, and she like
Amazing.
clicked on her thing, and it was like I was like, why is science a sad face? And she was like, it just is. I was like, okay.
You should have added that on the When Students Hurt Your Feelings episode. That's amazing. Oh, I love that. Yeah, you gotta be those Google Classrooms, those Canvases of the world. You gotta be careful with what students are able to do on those, like posting comments and stuff. That's fantastic. I love that. Okay, for our very last point here, and then I'm gonna give you a challenge. This is a challenge we're both gonna do. Okay, over the next week. All right, because again, and I was talking to my coworker the other day, and I said, the thing about the podcast is, I don't want it to be isolated to just my podcast, and then I'm coming to school and not, doing the things that we discuss. Mm-hmm. I'm not taking anything away from it. So this is a challenge, and for you teachers who are out there, feel free to join us on this challenge, so that we can try to make a little bit of a difference together. So teachers, they seemed starved for positive feedback. Teachers, they really want to know that what they're doing is good, right? Because we don't always know. So, like, how can we as teachers help support other teachers in terms of morale? And I got this idea because recently I was walking down the hall and I gave someone a compliment on their class or on their students, or I said something that was positive, and their face just lit up. Like it was just like they were, like it made their day. and it made me realize, like, we don't give each other enough credit for what we do well. We don't acknowledge each other enough, right? So I'm going to kind of add to this, and I don't know if there's anything that you can really think of that's different than this, but I have a little challenge that I think that maybe we should both do. This following week, either find a way to choose a few colleagues, a few teachers that either you're close with or maybe even people that you're not, and find a way to give them a compliment on something that they do really well, or that their classroom, that you really like about their classroom. Now, it's difficult. I know that we're not in other rooms a lot, so it's kind of hard. We don't always know, but you kind of know what most teachers do well in general, right? I think we both do. So we know those things. It's just that we don't share those things with them, right? So what I will probably do, this is going to be, I'm super interested to see how this goes with my staff. I may write a few notes about things that I like about their class, or things that I like that, things that I think they do well or whatever, and I may just put it in their mailbox and see, how it goes. I may do that every week. I may just pick a couple people and just tell them, hey, I saw your kids in the hallway the other day, and they were like really quiet. I thought it was really cool, or they seemed to really respect you, or like I'm going to find something really nice to say about some of my colleagues. So, what's your thoughts?
I love it. I love that. I know I don't give positive comments to my coworkers. Again, I'm kind of isolated as well, like in my own little classroom, my own little bubble. Um, and I think that is something simple and easy that we can do as educators to, you know, positively impact people in the profession, right? And
Mhm.
I mean, I think that developing a sense of positive, uh, you know, learning space is very important. And so I 100% agree. I love it. I did not know about this until just now, and I am ready to go. I'm already thinking of ways that I can. When you said writing letters to individual teachers, I'm already thinking of teachers that I can write letters to.
Yeah. I've been sitting here thinking the same thing, but
So,
it's like a simple thing that can make a big difference, right?
absolutely.
Like in somebody's day or somebody's week, especially in teaching. Like I said, we are starved for affirmation. We
Hmm.
need to know that what we're doing is good, and I think that this is an excellent way to do that. So, with that being said, I think we have reached the end of this episode. Again, try to make sure, if you could, we would really appreciate it. If you could subscribe, if you're listening on YouTube, you could like on whatever platform that you are listening on. Additionally, social media pages, we do have a Facebook, we do have a Twitter. If you could follow those, that would be fantastic as well. And we will see you next time on Brothers of the Board. Have a fantastic day.